I'd like now to ask, so William Cormacan and Sam Birch from National Parks, if you guys want to share your slides, that would be great. Thanks a million. So I'll give you a call, a 2-minute call towards the end of the talk, if that's okay.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Emer. My name is William Cormacan. I'm the Regional Manager in the Western Region, the National Parks and Wildlife Service. I'm joined today with my colleague, Sam Birch, and we'll give you a brief presentation of some of the project work we're doing, including riparian management up in the Wild Nephin National Park. So just a bit of background in relation to the National Park. It's 15,000 hectares. There's about 10,000 hectares of blanket bog and upland, and about 5,000 hectares of conifer plantation. It's the Owenduff bog, which is probably the most intact blanket bog in Western Europe, forms part of the National Park. There's 4 major river catchments that the park drains into: the Owen Moor, which is along the north, the Owenduff in the west, the Birch, which is in the southeast, and the Moy, which is to the east, the Deal, which is a tributary of the Moy. There's 3 special areas of conservation for, we'll say, freshwater species, and that you have the Owenduff Nephin, which is, and sorry, the River Moy, and also the Ballycroy Bog complex. They're designated for a suite of freshwater species, including Atlantic salmon, otter, and other species, including freshwater pearl mussel, which is in the Deal, which is part of the Moy catchment. You can't really talk about the National Park without also talking about the Wild Nephin Wilderness Project. This was a collaboration between ourselves and Coillte. It was mainly aimed at the Coillte Nephin Forest. It's about 4,000 hectares of conifer plantation, which wasn't really that commercially viable. So between ourselves and Coillte, we looked at drawing up a 15-year conversion plan, converting this area into wilderness. Now, we've had lots of delays in relation to the publication of the conversion plan. There has been significant changes in circumstances in that it's no longer a partnership. Coillte have leased on a long-term basis the Nephin Forest over to the National Parks and Wildlife Service, and the entire Wild Nephin area now is within the National Park and is being managed as part of the National Park. Also, there's been changes in the ethos and of the objective of the project, and in relation to what exactly we're trying to achieve, and I might mention a little bit about that later. We've had amendments to the draft conversion plan, and we would hope to go to public consultation and publication this year. So I suppose wilderness or not, so the Nephin Forest, which is the 4,200 hectares of forestry that has been leased on a long-term basis to the national parks from Coillte, well, it's a highly modified landscape. You can see there that there's bits of it that's over mature, it's wind-thrown. As I say, it would have been a commercial conifer plantation developed mainly on peats, including blanket bog and heath. It's a managed landscape. Even the whole national park, you have lots of grazing with sheep. As I said, there's lots of forestry, and again, you have to do management for fire. There's a huge problem with rhododendron in the national park. We estimate there could be up to 3,000 hectares infected with rhododendron. Again, we'll be managing that into the in long term for tens and tens of years within the national park. And again, we have the Bangor Trail, which is an old rovers trail in the Western Way, which is a public walking route that go up through the national park. So look, it's not really a wild area. When you look at the definition of wilderness, a wilderness is an area governed by natural processes. It is composed of native habitats and species, and large enough for effective ecological functioning and natural processes. It is unmodified or only slightly modified, and without intrusive or extractive human activity, settlements, infrastructure, or visual disturbance. So that doesn't really suit that definition of what's within the national park. So as part of the conversion plan, we're not looking to form a wilderness. We're looking more at rewilding and management of wild areas. I want to talk now about this project that we're involved in this year in NPWS. It's called Naturaback, and it's an application that we've submitted as part of the Horizon 2020 European Green Deal call. Now, that call was 1 billion for research and innovation projects that respond to the climate crisis and help protect Europe's unique ecosystems and biodiversity. So the National Parks and Wildlife Service is one of a consortium of 18 from 12 different countries. The name of the project that we're involved in is called Naturaback, and that stands for Putting Nature Back as a Keystone for Climate Resilience, Economic Growth and Human Wellbeing in Europe. Now, it's hoped that the project will demonstrate and promote systemic and cost-effective solutions for upscaling the restoration effort in Europe. And the targets it hopes to achieve is it will do so by delivering restoration on an unprecedented scale in Europe to date, 9 sites in 8 countries, working across and benefiting 590,210 hectares of key habitat, sequestering approximately 448,000 tons of CO2 equivalents by the end of the project, and over almost 1.5 million tons by 2041. So the National Park, the Wild Nephin National Park, it's going to be a demonstration site for all 3 of the restoration packages that are done under the application. So we'll be looking within the National Park to do woodland habitat, peatland ecosystem restoration, and river and wetland habitat. Now, we hope to get 1.85 million of funding, and that will be for these projects in the park. The application was submitted in January. We expect to get feedback over the summer, and the contracts potentially could be signed in September, and we could start on the project early next year. So in relation to the 3 work packages, the first one I'll deal with is the peatland ecosystem restoration. Now, that's a view down there as part of the headwaters of the Altnabucky River. It drains into the Owen Moor. It was one of the main catchments draining the northern part of the park. What you see in front of you is all National Park. Immediately to the right, looking down the valley, you can see a lot of failed conifer plantation. So about 320 hectares of this, it's a plantation that was planted in the mid-90s. It's in check, it's no longer growing, it's completely stagnated. The vegetation is less than 5 meters high. The canopy is very open. There's lots of heat in between the trees. Rhododendron ponticum is starting to increasingly colonize parts of this area. So the actions that we intend to do under the project is that we would fell to waste, which means we would just go in with chainsaws and knock the spruce and the pine. We would block any of the forestry drains that exist in the area. We would completely remove the rhododendron, and we would start to monitor the site and the changes in it. The other 2 restoration packages, and again, I said that we are one of the demonstration sites as part of the application or the bid, but the 2 other restoration packages or work packages we're involved in are the woodland habitat and the river and wetland habitat. Now, all this is happening in the Shreva catchment, which is a sub-catchment of the Bord Siúil. The Shreva itself is the most important spawning river within the Bord Siúil catchment. It's an SAC for salmonids. The entire catchment is 600 hectares. It's in the southeast section of the National Park. 90% of the catchment is within the National Park. The Shreva River itself is 6 kilometers of main channel, but the project area within the park is going to be 4 kilometers of main channel and 6 kilometers of feeder streams and drains, and these are all marked in the OS 1842 map. The woodland habitat under the application, we're looking to manage 50 hectares. We're going to install 4 kilometers of deer fencing and deer management. Again, we have grazers are an issue up there, including that of trespassing livestock. There's going to be reprofiling of commercial plantation, and what that is going to be is an 80% thinning. Again, this will be the result we were hoping will probably be a poor man's Caledonian forest. You'd have quite an open canopy with lots of the bog species recolonizing and that. This area down there, and you can see from the photograph, is heavily infested with rhododendron. So rhododendron is a huge challenge down that end of the park, as well as the 30 hectares that we're going to reprofile. There's going to be 10 hectares that are going to be clear fell plantation and replanted with native woodlands. And as well as that, there's going to be another 10 hectares that we're going to of existing native woodland that were previously planted by Quilcha in this area that we're going to enhance with probably some supplementary planting in that. Now, the Tareva catchment it's important. The entire catchment is managed by the Marine Institute. The catchment is dedicated to research, so we'll have a very close relationship with them on the monitoring of these sites. And the last thing is the river and wetland habitat. I said in the previous slide that there was 4 kilometres of main channel and 6 kilometres of feeder streams and drainage channels. Along the entirety of that, we're going to look at establishing a 25-metre buffer on either side of the channel. This area then will be allowed to either re-establish and form a natural heath vegetation, or there may be some planting with native broadleaves. Again, this section, it's a huge issue with rhododendron. It'll be a big challenge for us up there, and we intend to remove it completely from the 50 hectares of the riparian areas that we're managing. And like I said before, we'll be doing a lot of monitoring there with the Marine Institute. So I'll stop sharing now and I'll hand over to my colleague, Sam Birch.
Thanks a million for that. That's great.
Can you see that okay, Emma?
No, not yet. Yep, it's up now. You just need to go to full screen.
Is that okay?
Yep, that's perfect. Thanks, Emil.
Sorry for the delay there. But just very quickly, just additional to some of the projects that William talked about there, just some of the other work we've been doing apart from the bog restoration, and we've kind of focused on woodland establishment, native woodland establishment, and that's an example there of an area we've planted in the national park. But it's not straightforward, and we have huge challenges. As William mentioned, grazers, sheep and deer are a big problem for us, and you can see all the trees there have shelters, and they have to have shelters, or we have to put in fencing with no other option. Now there's larger scale planting going on that Quilcha are doing in consultation with ourselves also. And just as an example of of where we have fencing in, and we have sheep trying to get in through the fence on the outside, and we have deer inside the fence. You can see there, and you can see a picture in the left-hand corner where deer have broken the fence, and you can see a little holly, an example of a holly tree browsed in the right-hand corner. And again, this is with shelters, and one of our rangers there is showing an aspen tree that has done well, but you can see one below that in a smaller picture that's been browsed, and that's part of where we've cleared, where there's been conifers recently cleared, and we're creating a birch woodland. And then, as William mentioned, rhododendron is a huge problem, and you can see the picture in the left there is before we cleared rhododendron in this plot, and the picture to the right is when it was cleared, and the picture in the centre is only a few weeks ago when we planted Scots pine from the Burren, actually, and the only native Scots pine in the country, we think. So hopefully we'll have a stand of native Scots pine here instead of rhododendron. Another thing we look very favourably at is the native woodland scheme. We have limited areas for it because it's mainly bog and heath habitats which are not suitable. But this site here, we proposed 13 hectares, and due to the ecological limitations, the application ended up being 3 hectares. Due to rhododendron, aquatic setbacks required, and unplantable habitats. Plus, we have rare plants that aren't compatible with woodland. Here you can see examples of where we've just recently cleared a huge amount of very dense rhododendron, and you can see where it was completely covering one of the tributaries of the Owenduff. This is an example of unplantable habitats, which you can see are grazed also. And this is one of the rare plants where we can't plant trees. This is ivy-leaved bellflower, which is actually very frequent at this site, more than we thought. And recently we've just applied for the Wild Rivers label, which is not a legal designation, it's just a stamp of approval. And it goes above and beyond the Water Framework Directive and very much aimed at keeping the natural shape of a river. And you can see if we're successful, we're the only one in Ireland, we're actually the only one in the West. You can see all of the sites that have been approved are in France. And just on another aspect, but I think it does fit in with nature-based solutions, is we're doing pathworks in the park in order for people to be able to safely access areas of the park. And you can see on the right, that's the same place, that was thick rhododendron before we cleared it, and we've put a path in here now alongside the river. And it's a way of visitors being able to experience these areas sustainably without trampling across Annex 1 habitats, etc. And I think it fits in with the human well-being aspect of nature-based solutions. And that's it really, just a rundown of the kind of additional things we're doing and the challenges we're facing in the park.